NBC News now has some reporting here from our Courtney Kube from the Pentagon from multiple sources on this initial assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency. So I want to get right to Courtney, who I believe is joining us now from the Pentagon. There she is. Courtney, tell us what you know.
Yeah, and this is a group effort by NBC News, by the way. Our colleagues Gordon Lubel, Dan DeLuce, Ken Delaney, and Julie Sirkin, a number of people. But we now can report that, in fact, there was this initial Defense Intelligence Agency assessment about the strikes that the U.S. military took in Iran. And they found that, in fact, again, early assessment that the battle damage assessment showed that it may have only set the Iranian nuclear program back 3 to 6 months. That's according to 3 people familiar with this initial assessment. And Hallie, we're often reticent to talk about, this sort of a very early assessment. Literally, it came in only a matter of hours after these strikes took place. But 2 of the officials said, look, this assessment, yes, it's early, but there is also a follow-on assessment that it's possible that as they move forward and they get more and more information about how successful these strikes were, that they may, in fact, even assess that they were less successful and that it may be even fewer than 3 to 6 months before Iran is able to reconstitute what was destroyed. Now, I have to say, the military piece of this, the U.S. military strikes, they were directly on the targets, according to the officials who we spoke with. They hit exactly what they intended to. But this is really about the larger piece here, the larger nuclear program in Iran. It's not just taking out infrastructure. It's about actually setting back the program. And that appears to be part of what this assessment is based on. Because remember, the strikes were able to take out, we believe, parts of the facility at Fordo, parts of the facility at Natanz. We know that the Tomahawk missiles that were launched from a U.S. Navy submarine at the third site at Isfahan, we know that they were all successful in hitting their targets. But it's not really clear where all of the highly enriched uranium was and whether, in fact, that was able to set back the program beyond just the infrastructure damage, Hallie.
What's also interesting, Court, as we're looking at this, is that you and our team's reporting cites a person familiar who'd been briefed on this is saying this assessment is already finding that these core pieces are still intact, saying that's a bad sign for the overall program here, that there was maybe an assumption, to your point, what you just laid out, there was maybe an assumption built in that there would be more damage done, in fact. Help us understand that piece of it, because without, the United States doesn't have eyeballs on the ground in Iran, at least not eyeballs on the ground that we know about in any kind of official capacity.
Yeah, and when you're talking about a battle damage assessment, that is a critical piece, Hallie. Yeah. That's having people on the ground who can get eyes on, who can see exactly what happened here. At this point, we're not aware that the U.S. actually has that. So they're going to rely on other ways of gathering this sort of intelligence. Things like satellite imagery, things like intercepts. They're going to want to hear what people are saying about the damage that may have been done. And frankly, that's not done in a day or 2. In many cases, that can take weeks before there will be a wholesome, a full battle damage assessment of exactly what was done here. That's why I keep stressing that this is early. But, this is based off of information that was gathered in those early hours after the strikes that occurred, and that was filtered through the Defense Intelligence Agency. And this was the analysis that they came out here, was that, again, it does not appear, yes, while the strikes did hit what they were intended to, it does not appear that it set the program back more than, frankly, a matter of months.
So then the question becomes, and Courtney, I don't know that this is a question that military officials would even answer here, so it's really more rhetorical to you, but the question then becomes, was the strike worth the risk? This was obviously, as you well know, a highly coordinated, highly sophisticated, large operation in which there were no U.S. service member deaths. There were no deaths. There were no, you had 125 planes. You had these massive bombs deployed for the first time ever in combat on the battlefield like this in U.S. history here. A huge operation that at minimum, I think it's safe to say, did bring about at least a window for these ceasefire discussions to happen.
Yeah, I think the big question is going to be what happens next year. If the ceasefire holds, if there is some effort at diplomacy that seems to be successful, if, in fact, Israel and Iran stop trading fire back and forth, and if the strikes were a part of that, history will write whether that was actually this may have been a pivotal moment, the U.S. military taking these strikes. And I completely agree. Everything that we're hearing is that the operation to carry out these strikes was a resounding success in doing exactly what it was intended to.
Yeah.
And the fact that, this may not necessarily even be, obvious to a lot of the viewers, but the fact that all those aircraft were able to get into Iranian territory to carry out the mission and get out. Never a shot fired by the Iranians. In fact, there's no real indication that they even knew that the U.S. was flying in there. I mean, the fact that they were able to coordinate this across all these aircraft, various services, one little piece just to show you how carefully choreographed this was. The Tomahawk missiles were launched off those submarines more than an hour before they actually impacted there. So they had Tomahawk missiles coming off a submarine at the same time. Aircraft were flying in there. I mean, it was highly coordinated. But again, even if the military did their part, what appears to be flawlessly here, it doesn't mean that they were able to actually take out the program. For years, Hallie, we've been hearing that Iran's nuclear program cannot be handled militarily. And part of the reason is there's still know-how, and then there are still these stockpiles, which it's not really clear they were destroyed here.
Cora, before I let you go to go keep doing your reporting and get to Kier on more on the ceasefire, can I just ask you here, I want to remind people, because we talked about it 15 minutes ago at the top of the show, we've now been overtaken by your and the team's excellent reporting here, that the White House has pushed back on this. And one of the things that you've heard from White House and Pentagon officials is this idea that this was a quote, low-level assessment, right? That this did not necessarily reach the highest levels of DOD leadership, et cetera. Is that fairly typical in a situation like this, that you may have an early intelligence assessment that is circulated, not among the principals, but among a different level, and then, that continues to get refined as time goes on?
Yeah, this is an early assessment, and it will continue to be refined. It will continue to get, presumably, more information as they try to gather about what exactly happened at each of these three sites. But the reality, Hallie, I mean, look, intelligence assessments are often low confidence. So if that's what they mean by low level, then some intelligence stories that we have done have included low-level confidence assessments about whatever the issue is, and they've still proven to be true. So, and yes, you're right. We should say the White House is pushing back on this. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt criticizing the report, criticizing the intelligence analysis, and casting any doubt on whether it's even accurate.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.